Send down then upon me from the heaven of thy generosity that which will preserve me from anyone but thee, and will profit me in all thy worlds. Verily, thou art the powerful, the inaccessible, the supreme, the knowing, the wise. Baha'u'llah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. Allahu Akbar. So excited to see each and every one of you. We're going to do a recap. This is God Passes By. Again, a story covering the first 100 years of the Baha'i era. As Shoghi Effendi coins the term, the Baha'i era, which encapsulates obviously the era of the Bab and indeed the era of Baha'u'llah. So, going back to where we were last time, what we'd covered, Mirza Yahya, who was in Mazandaran, this area up here, just above Tehran. He causes a lot of problems for a lot of the Babis in Nur. As a result, he then moves on to Rasht, and then he goes to Kermanshah. He's in hiding, essentially. He goes in the guise of a dervish, doing all he can to stay out of trouble, because Babis are being killed. He was working for Abdullah Ghazvini, and he took on the name Mulli Ali al-Lasfush. So he was selling materials, and he came across Baha'u'llah, and he asked Baha'u'llah, he said, look, is there any chance I could have some money to do some business? Baha'u'llah then gave him money and said, okay, fine, you can try and work, and you can try and sell some materials or whatever it is you want. We then hear about Mirza Agha Jan, who was given the title Khadimullah, the servant of God. He had a dream in which he discovered the Bab. He then also, after reading Baha'u'llah's writings, decided that he wanted to head to Iraq to go and actually meet Baha'u'llah. He then leaves Kashan for Iraq, having discussions with Baha'u'llah, and becomes very prominent. Nabil is told a beautiful story where Mirza Agha Jan sees Baha'u'llah praying as they're sleeping on this rooftop in the house of Haji Mirza Hussain Hakim Bashi, and he sees the power that's coming out of Baha'u'llah, the majesty, and here he recognizes the station of Baha'u'llah. However, Baha'u'llah asks him to keep it to himself. Mirza Yahya and Sayyid Muhammad, some jealousy, and they're really riled up by this. Mirza Yahya, of course, is Baha'u'llah's half-brother, who is known as the nominal leader of the Babis. And Sayyid Muhammad was another one of these guys who really was trying to push Mirza Yahya as much as he can to try and take leadership and try and take power. So he was really working in his ear. We then look at the tablets, the Kulat Ta'am, which is the tablet of all food, a very beautiful tablet which was written to Haji Mirza Kamaluddin Naraghi. Now this Haji Mirza Kamaluddin Naraghi had first asked Mirza Yahya to explain this passage from the Quran about all food shall be given to the children of Israel. Mirza Yahya tries to explain and tries to write, but it's absolutely complete nonsense as far as Haji Mirza Kamaluddin Naraghi understands. He then asks Baha'u'llah, and Baha'u'llah writes this beautiful tablet which is known as the Kulat Ta'am, which essentially gives these answers. In this tablet, incidentally, this is where Qudus, the last letter of the living, was given the title The Last Point. So that appears in this particular tablet. A lot of the government officials and people who'd followed Sayyid Kazim in Baghdad start falling in love with Baha'u'llah as well. They're around Baha'u'llah and they really start seeing some incredible qualities, and they're very much drawn to him. Again, Mirza Yahya and Sayyid Muhammad become more jealous. It's at this point they start trying to attack Baha'u'llah, trying to attack his writings, and they accuse him of being a usurper. So someone who's coming to take power away and become a leader. Baha'u'llah then explains a lot of his sorrows. He reveals a bunch of prayers in which he talks about tribulation after tribulation has reached him, that his wretchedness has touched him, woes that their blackest have befallen him, and powerlessness, poverty, and destruction have come upon him. He then goes on to say that every mother mourning for her child would be amazed and would still their weeping if they understood the conditions that Baha'u'llah was in. He reveals something called the Loh-e Maryam, the Tablet of Maryam, and he says that in Tehran, countless afflictions befell him from the tyrants of Persia. Obviously, he was sent out. In Iraq, he had to deal with the fetters of their foes, the people within the Babi community, I guess, said Muhammad and Mirza Yahya would be two of these people, that they were against him, and that he bore what no man could bear to carry either now, in the past, or in the future. In the Qasadiyya Varaghiya, this ode, which was written in Kurdistan when Baha'u'llah eventually goes to the mountain, he talks about Noah's flood is but a measure of the tears he sheds. Such a difficult time this is. In the Igan, he says, such jealousy has never appeared in the past or will appear in the future. For 2 years, shunned all else but God, and he closed his eyes to all except him, hoping that the fire of hatred and the heat of jealousy would be abated. This is what he was doing in the mountains. It was such a horrible, horrible time to begin with. Mirza Agha Jan, who I've aforementioned, the one who sees Baha'u'llah and recognizes Baha'u'llah's station, he says that one day he sees Baha'u'llah and his body is trembling from sadness. He seems so perturbed that he couldn't even look Baha'u'llah in the eyes. And Baha'u'llah said that creatures for 3,000 years have been worshipping idols and a golden calf, and the people of today are not dissimilar. They're fit for nothing better. Such was his disillusion with the state of people at the time. Mirza Agha Jan stands lifeless, dead as if a tree, doesn't know what to say, and this is where Baha'u'llah says to him, bid people, tell them to recite the remover of difficulties. The prayer by the Bab is the ready remover of difficulties. Save God, say praise be God, he is God, all are his servants and all abide by his biddings. Do this 500 times. He says, no, do this 1,000 times, so that hopefully their eyes will be open and they'll be able to see the countenance of the All-Glorious. Baha'u'llah a few times alluded in the Kitab-i-Iqan about the object of what he was trying to do and how he had moved to the mountains to avoid discord and disunity. The 10th of April 1854 sees Baha'u'llah leave. He also goes with his attendant, Abul Qasim Hamadani, but this attendant unfortunately is set upon and is killed whilst in the mountains. Baha'u'llah is then in Kurdistan. He's roaming around. He writes this Lohe Maryam, which I've mentioned. And in this, he talks about how he was alone. He had tears of anguish. His heart had pain. There was no food, no rest, such terrible conditions. He then here reveals odes, prayers, soliloquies where he's talking out to himself in verse and prose in both Arabic and in Persian. He talks about the sorrows, the horrific sorrows which is born. He praises God. He praises the maiden of heaven that had spoken to him in the Siyachal. He talks about the past tribulations, the blindness of the people, the perversity of the people. He says that he's going to arise for the vindication of the cause. He also recalls Imam Hussein and the horrible happenings that happened to him in Karbala, the story of Joseph, and also the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in Mecca. He recalls all these things that had befallen these odes, these prayers, these soliloquies. These were the forerunners of things such as the Kitab-i-Iqan, or the hidden words of the 7 valleys that were written before the Baghdad period. But these paved the way for things to go on, like the epistles to the kings and rulers that we know he writes on later. Or, he finally starts explaining more about his mission and the law and ordinances of his dispensation in Akka. Sheikh Ismail, who is in Kurdistan, has this dream of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where in it he's directed to go and find Baha'u'llah. He goes to Kurdistan and he ends up finding Baha'u'llah. And whilst he's there, he persuades Baha'u'llah eventually to come from these mountains of Kurdistan to Sulaymaniyah. So this is now where Baha'u'llah is going to be. So whilst they're there in Sulaymaniyah, he persuades Baha'u'llah to come. A lot of the Baghdad friends now hear that Baha'u'llah, they understand that, oh, Baha'u'llah might be around. So they decide to send someone by the name of Sheikh Sultan, who was the father-in-law of Agha Khalim, of Mirza Musa. So he is then sent to go up to Sulaymaniyah to try and induce Baha'u'llah to come back. We know that Sheikh Sultan, he tells Nabil from Nabil's narrative that he found people absolutely enraptured in Baha'u'llah. That Baha'u'llah had won the support of many of the Naqshbandiya tribe of Sheikh Usman, of the Qadriya, Sheikh Abdul Rahman, and of the Khalidiyya, Sheikh Ismail. These 3 different tribes. Bear in mind, this area is a Sunni area, and we're dealing with Sufis, and Sufis can be lean towards Sunnism more or Shiism, or they take various different forms in which they do. And the Sufis very much believe that everything is within everything. For example, monism, where essentially you might say that the sea evaporates and then it turns into a cloud and then it comes back into a sea. So the sea is within everything, the cloud is in within everything. And then you've got this idea of emanation, where you have the sun, and the sun sends its rays, and the rays can be found in the flower and the person, the heat. But that's not the sun, they're different. So this is where the Sufis, from what I understand, believe more in monism, which is we have this story of Mustafa, this dervish, remember, who's eating God and cooking God that Baha'u'llah comes across. So just a short introduction into what Sufism is, but it's way deeper than that, as I know our dear brother Patrick could expound upon for hours and hours. But anyway, so he manages to talk to these people and they start falling in love with him. They're absolutely blown away, especially Sheikh Ismail, who was the Khalidiyya leader. So much so that they actually find Baha'u'llah to be equal to Khalid, who had started the entire movement. To Sheikh Abdul Rahman of the Qadriya, he'd written this 4 valleys, and Sheikh Abdul Rahman had 100,000 followers that he commanded. So these 3 were absolutely blown away. Baha'u'llah didn't go around advertising, saying, hey, I'm a manifestation, hey, I've got incredible knowledge. They found some of his writings, and from that, they were blown away. They said, watch this. Sheikh Ismail, along with some doctors and some of his leading students, he's the head of the Khalidiyya, he goes to Baha'u'llah and he's so enraptured, and he says to him, look, I've got some abstruse passages of the Futuhat al-Makkiyya, and can you please expound upon these? He'd never heard these before, but he would take them and he'd expound them so beautifully that people were just blown away by them. They then said to him, look, can you please produce something in the same poetic rhythm and verse as the Qasidiyya Tahiyya by Ibn Farid? He produces 2,000 verses. And he doesn't give them all to them, he lets them see them, but then he says, look, you are not ready for some of this stuff. I'm going to give you 127 verses. And this goes on to be what's known as the Qasidiyya Barghayya. And they're absolutely blown away. This is known as the most outstanding event of the 2 years. The people are blown away. Now, lots of people want to follow him. Some people even think he's a prophet. Huh? Could he be? Could he not? But this is the thinking at the time. Baha'u'llah and the Loha Maryam, the tablet to Maryam, says that this period, this 2 years, is the most mightiest period, the most perfect and conclusive evidence of the truth of his revelation. Meanwhile, things down in Baghdad are not good. In Baghdad, the Babis are getting a little bit lost. Things are not good. Mirza Yahya and Sayyid Muhammad are causing a lot of problems for people. They actually send Mirza Muhammad Mazandari to go and kill Dayan, who was the third person to believe in Baha'u'llah, the third letter to believe in Baha'u'llah. They get Mirza Aghajan himself. They persuade him to go and wait and to try and kill the Shah. They also order that Mirza Ali Akbar, who was the Bab's cousin, should be killed, and indeed they succeeded in killing him. Sayyid Muhammad, who was now given the free reins by his master Mirza Yahya, he starts causing all sorts of problems. He's getting the Babis involved in theft. They're going around stealing turbans from people. They're stealing shoes from mosques. They're stealing candles. They're even going and stealing drinking cups from the fountains. They've lost everything, and now the Babis are known to be these people who steal. The reputation of the Babis is in absolute tatters. The Guardian makes this comparison with Hojat, with Vahid, with Tahireh, with Mullah Hussein. These stories when these Babis were asked to throw away their possessions, and Badi's father throws away the turquoise that he has, that they were impeccable in their manners and the way in which to deal with things. Now things have gone down. Things have started to take a terrible twist. Abdul Baha says that at this period, there were 25 Babis who had claimed to be him whom God shall make manifest. An absolute shocking state of events. Baha'u'llah then comes back to Baghdad because of this mystic fame, he says, calling him to Baghdad. He also comes and he says to Sheikh Sultan, who's the father-in-law of Mirza Musa Agha Khalid, who was sent to go and get him, he says to him, I would have never, ever come back to be around these Babis with all the things that they're doing. I've only come back to avoid a collapse of the Babi community. The Babi community is on the verge of being obliterated by what these people are doing. March 19th, 1856 is when His Holiness Baha'u'llah returns back to Baghdad.
The return of Baha'u'llah from Sulaymaniyah to Baghdad marks a turning point of the utmost significance in the history of the first Baha'i century. The tide of the fortunes of the faith, having reached its lowest ebb, was now beginning to surge back and was destined to roll on steadily and mightily to a new high watermark, associated this time with the declaration of his mission on the eve of his banishment to Constantinople. With his return to Baghdad, a firm anchorage was now being established, an anchorage such as the faith had never known in its history. Never before, except during the first 3 years of his life, could that faith claim to have possessed a fixed and accessible center to which its adherents could turn for guidance, and from which they could derive continuous and unobstructed inspiration. No less than half of the Bab's short-lived ministry was spent on the remotest border of his native country, where he was concealed and virtually cut off from the vast majority of his disciples. The period immediately after his martyrdom was marked by a confusion that was even more deplorable than the isolation caused by his enforced captivity. Nor when the revelation which he had foretold made its appearance, was it succeeded by an immediate declaration that could enable the members of a distracted community to rally around the person of their expected deliverer. The prolonged self-concealment of Mirza Yahya, the center provisionally appointed pending the manifestation of the promised one, the 9 months absence of Baha'u'llah from his native land while on a visit to Karbala, followed swiftly by his imprisonment in the Siachal, by his banishment to Iraq, and afterwards by his retirement to Kurdistan, all combined to prolong the phase of instability and suspense through which the Babi community had to pass. Now at last, in spite of Baha'u'llah's reluctance to unravel the mystery surrounding his own position, the Babis found themselves able to center both their hopes and their movements around one whom they believed, whatever their views as to his station, capable of ensuring the stability and integrity of their faith. The orientation which the faith had thus acquired and the fixity of the center towards which it now gravitated continued in one form or another to be its outstanding features, of which it was never again to be deprived. The faith of the Bab, as already observed, had, in consequence of the successive and formidable blows it had received, reached the verge of extinction. Nor was the momentous revelation vouchsafed to Baha'u'llah in the Siachal productive at once of any tangible results of a nature that would exercise a stabilizing influence on a well-nigh disrupted community. Baha'u'llah's unexpected banishment had been a further blow to its members, who had learned to place their reliance upon him. Mirza Yahya's seclusion and inactivity further accelerated the process of disintegration that had set in. Baha'u'llah's prolonged retirement to Kurdistan seemed to have set the seal on its complete dissolution. Now, however, the tide that had ebbed in so alarming a measure was turning, bearing with it, as it rose to flood point, those inestimable benefits that were to herald the announcement of the revelation already secretly disclosed to Baha'u'llah. During the 7 years that elapsed between the resumption of his labors and the declaration of his prophetic mission, years to which we now direct our attention, it would be an exaggeration to say that the Baha'i community, under the name and in the shape of a re-arisen Babi community, was born and was slowly taking shape, though its creator still appeared in the guise of and continued to labor as one of the foremost disciples of the Bab. It was a period during which the prestige of the community's nominal head steadily faded from the scene, paling before the rising splendor of him who was its actual leader and deliverer. It was a period in the course of which the first fruits of an exile, endowed with incalculable potentialities, ripened and were garnered. It was a period that will go down in history as one during which the prestige of a recreated community was immensely enhanced, its morals entirely reformed, its recognition of him who rehabilitated its fortunes enthusiastically affirmed, its literature enormously enriched, and its victories over its new adversaries universally acknowledged.
Very beautifully read, as per usual. You need to come on a class and learn how to read from yourself. Absolutely wonderful. So we are dealing again with this story where the return of Baha'u'llah from Sulaymaniyeh to Baghdad. So he was there for 2 years, we know. He'd withdrawn, obviously, because of the problems that were being caused by Mirza Yahya. He wanted to avoid all problems. He then now is coming back to Baghdad, and he said on his journey back, actually, to Baghdad, that he knows that life is going to get very tough from here on in. And he wasn't wrong. This was a turning point of utmost significance in the history of the Babi centuries, what it says. And the Babi community had reached its lowest ebb. And this is the point it was beginning to surge back. Baha'u'llah had come in, and he's now trying to give CPR to the community, trying to revive it and take it back to what His Holiness the Bab had actually tried to share with his message. Mirza Yahya, who was the nominal leader, who was meant to be doing something and meant to be directing people to find Baha'u'llah and be in charge, he had completely lost the plot. He was absolutely terrified of being attacked. He went into hiding, and he had Sayyid Muhammad, who was pushing him the entire time, trying to get him to take power and not really focus on what was being said. This is where the jealousy and the envy came in on Baha'u'llah. So unfortunately, the Babis were robbed of him. You know, once the major people had died, you know, Mullah Hussain, Bahir, Tahir al-Quddus, once they had all passed away, and of course His Holiness the Bab, this is where Mirza Yahya should have stepped up. However, this did not happen. Baha'u'llah himself, remember, when he was in the Siyar wasn't able to be accessed. The Bab himself also had spent, you know, the first 3 years of his life were okay. He was able to sort of share and talk to people, but then the last 3, he was, you know, up in the prisons in Marku and Chekhrek, and when he was in Tabriz, he wasn't able to speak to the Bab. So the Babis essentially had no one. Baha'u'llah was in Karbala. He went there to try and sort out the mess that people were creating in Karbala, because of course the Bab was meant to go to Karbala, and the plan was changed. Some people found this so terrible, and they said, right, well, we can't believe in the Bab. So Baha'u'llah went there for a while. So they had no one. Now, after a while, Baha'u'llah has come back, and he is in Baghdad. So they have someone who they can send to there. Baha'u'llah obviously had his revelation in the Siyar in 53, but this didn't turn into anything tangible, as in he didn't announce who he was. During the 7 years since the resumption of the community, this is where things start taking shape. This is where the morals are reformed, that we're going back to the drawing board. This is where Mirza Yahya and his eminence starts to fade, being this leader, because he's not doing anything. People are going to be rallying around Baha'u'llah.
I have a comment. In one of the previous sessions, the question came up, why was Mirza Yahya appointed by the Bab? Mm-hmm. And I don't think we had a satisfactory answer, but it is that Mirza Yahya was appointed until the advent of Man Yassar Allah, which is the one whom God would make manifest. So I think that provides an explanation, but I'm wondering whether Khaze can add to that, because we left that question hanging in the air.
Okay, I think the answer was what you gave, actually, and also the fact that I think it was to detract from Baha'u'llah. But yes, there's so yes.
Okay. I actually asked that question, and I get the impression that the reason why was if they'd had a very good, capable leader, then it would have been harder for Baha'u'llah to take over, perhaps. So when you've got the contrast of a really poor leader and then you have Baha'u'llah where there's like no comparison, it makes it easier. So I thought that was another reason, but that was what I kind of read between the lines of what I think Khaza was saying, but I wasn't all that there last session, so I might be wrong.
Thank you, Sandra. Bayon Salmanpour, I think, raised his hand. Were you going to say something? And Khaza, if you are with us and you want to add to that, please, by all means, that'd be lovely. But Bayon, were you having to say something? Cool.
Yes, Dave. Alapa, first of all. And now this is I'm relying on my memory, which is very. Thank you. From my memory, if I'm not mistaken, the Bab wrote in a letter to Baha'u'llah, okay, in which he asked Baha'u'llah who he should choose, and Baha'u'llah mentioned Yahya, okay, Mirza Yahya to become the administrator until him whom God shall make manifest becomes clear who he is. So in fact, the Bab had asked Baha'u'llah for guidance in this. Okay, so it was not that the Bab himself chose. He corresponded with Baha'u'llah on this matter, and he followed exactly as Baha'u'llah had instructed on this. Okay, as to where now, I read this, unfortunately I cannot remember, but maybe Mr. Dr. Khazi can elaborate on this.
Thank you very much, Bayan. Salman Pur, a man of great knowledge, who's with us. But that's interesting. Yes, Khaza, are you there with us? Okay, well, maybe we'll wait until he's available a bit later. I do know he was going to have a lie down and then join us on this. But thank you very much, Khunam Khorada. An interesting point that's raised, and we'll perhaps look to that. Are there any other comments or questions with regards to what we've just covered?
Yes, I just wanted to say these are all God's plans, and to try and delve into it to see why and wherefore is really not our business.
Well, I guess none of it's our business, looking at it that way, yeah. But yes, but it'll be interesting to find some things. But yeah, everything is God's plan. That's definitely for sure. Dear Paul, were you going to say something?
Oui, écoute, it's like Mason Remy in France. He was the head of the chorus. And then his ego took place and he lost his position. So maybe, I don't know, but maybe it's some example for us to understand that be careful. You have to be careful. You have to be very careful of your own self. Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe there's lessons.
It's just an idea.
Thank you, Paul. I do know that Baha'u'llah several times had looked out for Mirza Yahya, tried to counsel him, tried to bring him in, but the question is, why do people turn bad? And I guess that's the point that dear Paul was making there as well. Any other comments or questions?
Dave, I got a question.
Cool.
This was the first time I've heard that that Baha'u'llah and the Bab communicated like this in terms of Yahya. How often did they communicate? Was it a lot between Baha'u'llah and the Bab?
I think there were quite a few tablets that went back and forth. Yeah, quite a few things that they'd communicated on. So it's not a one-off, but yeah, there are a few things that they had spoken about. Again, if you remember when the Bab was being taken up to Tehran to meet the king initially, but then he gets taken off to Marko and Shahrev, the Bab disappears, and he's seen walking back from the direction of Tehran, and some people said maybe the Bab met Baha'u'llah. Abdul Baha said no, that didn't happen, but Baha'u'llah says we did meet him. So when he says we met him, I don't believe that to be physical per se, but whether they're writing in letters, and these are manifestations of God, bear in mind, they don't need the pen and the paper to do so. So all of this, I think, is just simplified a lot for our understanding and things for us to read, but it's on another plane. I mean, in a way, they're one and the same. They're the same essence anyway. So yeah, But good question.
Thank you.
I think I don't think you can hear me on this computer, dearest Dave.
Beautifully.
This one doesn't. That's a miracle, because this is the one that didn't work. So I'll try my best. Everybody has said it very, very beautifully, especially that I think our friend from Haiti, that lady who's very aware of tests. In essence, the Babi faith, the Islamic faith, the Christian faith, all these faiths, intrinsic to them are two things. One is a sense of mystery, asrar, mystery, things that, as Mr. Kuchekzadeh said, we cannot delve into. There is a component of faith, a component of religion in general, that there is mystery. The second one is that there is another component of the faith, that there will be something called fitna. Fitna. In the Quran it says belief has to be associated with fitna. Fitna means being tested. And these testing, as Baha'u'llah says in the Book of Certitude, goes on to your last breath. And that's why the gentleman Khadimullah, who was seeing oceans and oceans of light round Baha'u'llah, when Baha'u'llah ascended, he turned against his covenant. And there are many, many examples. So two elements, dear Dave. One is a component of mystery. Why is it that after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in front of about 5,000 people said, Ali Ali, Ali. Then as soon as he ascended, they turned away from him, and Islam then and there started in its sectarian journey. Why is it Jesus Christ, when he appointed St. Peter, Peter denied him 3 times on the night that he was going to be crucified? Tests. So the Guardian has a tawghi, a letter in Persian. He says that the tests, imtihan, is a very, very serious component of faith. And he actually enumerates 6 or 7 factors that contribute to our fallibility where tests are concerned. Maul, jah, mansab, maqam, riyafat. He quickly, I try to remember them quickly. The finance, position, station, the dignity that you have in the community, all of these become major stumbling blocks and towards the test. So in terms of Mirza Yahya, remember he's a young man of about 18. Baha'u'llah, as I said, 11 years or 10 years his senior. The Bab says to Baha'u'llah, I'd like to write to someone. I'd like you to be happy. Baha'u'llah says, not me in front of these Babi community. And can you imagine, just imagine, 1848, 1850, when with all this cruelty going on at that time, all this desire to shed blood, if Baha'u'llah, if the Bab has said Baha'u'llah is after me, go to his house in Tehran, how many people would have thronged? What massacres would have induced? How many? So there was a direction that who is there, as the Guardian calls him, there's a nominee. Nominee means X. X is going to lead you. What is Mirza Yahya? Where is he? He's a young one. But where is he actually? Oh, he's in the mountains. So you see, directed them away so that Baha'u'llah could go through his own journey, which took about 11 years, 12 years, of preparing the Babi community, of, as you say, revealing the 7 valleys, 4 valleys, hidden words, Book of Search, so that they all would be ready for the next step. And in his own reality, although he suffered what no human reality or no manifestation of God suffered, but yet he had provided the nidus, the niche where he could declare himself. So Mirza Yahya could have perhaps turned around and conquered his ego and become a support, but then there would not have been a test for the Babi community. The Guardian says this, and I say it very briefly. He says, in this dispensation, all the believer, everyone will perish except the believers. Mu'minun. And then he says, all the believers will perish except those who are tested. And then he says, all those who are tested will perish except those who are most sincere. And then he says, and those who are most sincere are in grave danger. Can you imagine Khadim Allah seeing oceans of light every day in the presence of Baha'u'llah and his secretary falling by the wayside? The branch of the faith, half brother of Abdullah, etc. So I think when people ask me, I say in a sense it's a mystery, because if it was very clear that X is the leader after Y and everybody universally accepts him, then faith becomes automatic. But in the Quran, and Baha'u'llah repeats it, imtihan. أَحَسِبَ النَّاسَ أَنْ يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Is it possible to have belief without tests?
The prestige of the community, and particularly that of Baha'u'llah, now began from its first inception in Kurdistan to mount in a steadily rising crescendo. Baha'u'llah had scarcely gathered up again the reins of the authority he had relinquished when the devout admirers he had left behind in Sulaymaniyah started to flock to Baghdad with the name of Darwish Muhammad on their lips and the house of Mirza Musa the Babi as their goal. Astonished at the sight of so many ulamas and Sufis of Kurdish origin, of both the Qadriyeh and Khalidiyeh orders, thronging the house of Baha'u'llah, and impelled by racial and sectarian rivalry, the religious leaders of the city, such as the renowned Ibn Alusi, the Mufti of Baghdad, together with Sheikh Abdul Salam, Sheikh Abdul Qadir, and Syed Dawoodi, began to seek his presence, and having obtained completely satisfying answers to their several queries, enrolled themselves among the band of his earliest admirers. The unqualified recognition by these outstanding leaders of those traits that distinguish the character and conduct of Baha'u'llah stimulated the curiosity and later evoked the unstinted praise of a great many observers of less conspicuous position, among whom figured poets, mystics, and notables who either resided in or visited the city. Government officials, foremost among whom were Abdullah Pasha and his lieutenant Mahmud Akka and Mullah Ali Mardan, a Kurd well known in those circles, were gradually brought into contact with him and lent their share in noising abroad his fast-spreading fame. Nor could those distinguished Persians who either lived in Baghdad and its environs or visited as pilgrims the holy places remain impervious to the spell of his charm. Princes of the royal blood, amongst whom were such personages as the Naibulia Ilya, the Shajwad Dawli, the Safud Dawli, and Zainul Abdin Khan, the Fakhrut Dawli, were likewise irresistibly drawn into the ever-widening circle of his associates and acquaintances. Those who, during Baha'u'llah's 2 years' absence from Baghdad, had so persistently reviled and loudly derided his companions and kindred were by now for the most part silenced. Not an inconsiderable number among them feigned respect and esteem for him. A few claimed to be his defenders and supporters, while others professed to share his beliefs and actually joined the ranks of the community to which he belonged. Such was the extent of the reaction that had set in that one of them was even heard to boast that, as far back as the year 1250 AH, a decade before the Bab's declaration, he had already perceived and embraced the truth of his faith. Within a few years after Baha'u'llah's return from Sulaymaniyah, the situation had been completely reversed. The house of Sulaymaniyah Ghanam, on which the official designation of the Bayt-i-Azam, the most great house, was later confirmed, known at the time as the house of Mirza Musa, the Babi, an extremely modest residence situated in the Kar quarter in the neighborhood of the western bank of the river, to which Baha'u'llah's family had moved prior to his return from Kurdistan, had now become the focal center of a great number of seekers, visitors, and pilgrims, including Kurds, Persians, Arabs, and Turks, and derived from the Muslim, the Jewish, and Christian faiths. It had, moreover, become a veritable sanctuary to which the victims of the injustice of the official representative of the Persian government were wont to flee in the hope of securing redress for the wrongs they had suffered. At the same time, an influx of Persian Babis, whose sole object was to attain the presence of Baha'u'llah, swelled the stream of visitors that poured through his hospitable doors, carrying back on their return to their native country innumerable testimonies, both oral and written, to his steadily rising power and glory. They could not fail to contribute in a vast measure to the expansion and progress of a newly reborn faith.
4 of the Bab's cousins and his maternal uncle, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad, a granddaughter of Fath Ali Shah and fervent admirer of Tahirih, surnamed Waraqatul Rizban, the erudite Mullah Muhammad Qaini, surnamed Nabir Akbar, the already famous Mullah Sadiq Khurasani, surnamed Ismullahul Astaq, who with Quddus had been ignominiously persecuted in Shiraz. Mullah Baqir, one of the letters of the living, Sayyid Asadullah, surnamed Dayan, the revered Sayyid Jabad Karbelai, Mirza Muhammad Hassan, and Mirza Muhammad Hussein, later immortalized by the titles of Sultan al-Shuhada and Mahbub al-Shuhada, King of Martyrs and Beloved of Martyrs, respectively. Mirza Muhammad Ali Nahri, whose daughter at a later date was joined in wedlock to Abdul Baha. The immortal Sayyid Ismail Zawarei, Haji Sheikh Muhammad, surnamed Nabil by the Bab. The accomplished Mirza Aqay Munir, surnamed Ismullahul Munib, the long-suffering Haji Muhammad Taqi, surnamed Ayub. Mullah Zainul Abidin, surnamed Zainul Muqarrabin, who had ranked as a highly esteemed mujtahid. All these were numbered among the visitors and fellow disciples who crossed his threshold, caught a glimpse of the splendor of His Majesty, and communicated far and wide the creative influences instilled into them through their contact with his spirit. Mullah Muhammad Zarandi, surnamed Nabil Azam, who may well rank as his poet laureate, his chronicler, and his indefatigable disciple, had already joined the exiles and had launched out on his long and arduous series of journeys to Persia in furtherance of the cause of his beloved. Even those who, in their folly and temerity, had in Baghdad, in Karbala, in Qom, in Kashan, in Tabriz, and in Tehran, arrogated to themselves the rights and assumed the title of him whom God shall make manifest, were for the most part instinctively led to seek his presence, confess their error, and supplicate his forgiveness. As time went on, fugitives, driven by the ever-present fear of persecution, sought with their wives and children the relative security afforded them by close proximity to one who had already become the rallying point for the members of a sorely vexed community. Persians of high eminence living in exile, rejecting, in the face of the mounting prestige of Baha'u'llah, the dictates of moderation and prudence, sat forgetful of their pride at his feet and imbibed each according to his capacity, a measure of his spirit and wisdom. Some of the more ambitious among them, such as Abbas Mirza, a son of Muhammad Shah, the Wazir Nizam, and Mirza Malkam Khan, as well as certain functionaries of foreign governments, attempted in their short-sightedness to secure his support and assistance for the furtherance of the designs they cherished, designs which he unhesitatingly and severely condemned. Nor was the then representative of the British government, Colonel Sir Arnold Burroughs Campbell, Consul General in Baghdad, insensible of the position which Baha'u'llah now occupied. Entering into friendly correspondence with him, he, as testified by Baha'u'llah himself, offered him the protection of British citizenship, called on him in person, and undertook to transmit to Queen Victoria any communication he might wish to forward to her. He even expressed his readiness to arrange for the transfer of his residence to India or to any place agreeable to him. This suggestion Baha'u'llah declined, choosing to abide in the dominions of the Sultan of Turkey. And finally, during the last year of his sojourn in Baghdad, the governor Namir Pasha, impressed by the many signs of esteem and veneration in which he was held, called upon him to pay his personal tribute to one who had already achieved so conspicuous a victory over the hearts and souls of those who had met him. So profound was the respect the governor entertained for him, whom he regarded as one of the lights of the age, that it was not until the end of 3 months, during which he had received 5 successive commands from Ali Pasha, that he could bring himself to inform Baha'u'llah that it was the wish of the Turkish government that he should proceed to the capital. On one occasion, when Abdul Baha and Aghaya Kalim had been delegated by Baha'u'llah to visit him, he entertained them with such elaborate ceremonial that the deputy governor stated that so far as he knew, no notable of the city had ever been accorded by any governor so warm and courteous a reception. So struck indeed had the Sultan Abdul Majid been by the favorable reports received about Baha'u'llah from successive governors of Baghdad. This is the personal testimony given by the governor's deputy to Baha'u'llah himself, that he consistently refused to countenance the requests of the Persian government, either to deliver him to their representative or to order his expulsion from Turkish territory.
Many people from Soleimaniye, who were in the mountains with Baghdad after Baha'u'llah had left, they had basically come down to see him. They were very much enamored with him, very much in love with him. They weren't happy not staying there. We know that Ibn al-Usi, the Mufti of Baghdad himself, Sheikh Abul Salam, Sheikh Abul Ghadir and Sayyid Dawudi, they came down and they started absolutely falling in love with Baha'u'llah, and they wanted to learn more from him and be around him. We know that some poets and mystics as well, who weren't so prominent, they were falling in love with the light of Baha'u'llah. Some of the government officials even, Abdullah Pasha, Mahmoud Agha, Mullah Ali Mardan, he also was falling in love with Baha'u'llah. We know that princes of royal blood even, the Naibullah Iyaleh, the Safud-Dawleh, Zainul Abidin Khan, Farukhi Dawleh, they were coming and they were again falling in love, and they were very much becoming his admirers. They were really falling in love with him. So again, this power of Baha'u'llah, similar to the power of the Bab, when he was put in various prisons, how people would start running around. This was coming through. He stayed in the house of Suleiman al-Ghanam, which is later on known as the Most Great House. This is where he was staying. And that this is going to be the focal point where a lot of the Babis would come and would visit. And this is where they'd have their audience with Baha'u'llah, in this very house, the Suleiman al-Ghanam. Whilst they're there, even those people who have been persecuted, arguably by the Iranian government, they have escaped from Iran and they are coming to seek refuge at the house of Baha'u'llah. Now, Baha'u'llah didn't get involved with any of those interactions with other people. That wasn't what he was there for, but he was there to spread love and to be a solace for many people. Four of the Bab's cousins and maternal uncle, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad, had come to visit. The granddaughter of Fath Ali Shah, the father of Muhammad Shah, the grandfather of Muhammad Shah, she was there. We know that Mullah Muhammad al-Gaini, so the person who built the house of Babiyeh, if you remember, in Mashhad, he was there. He was also visited by Mullah Sadeh Khorasani, who we know about, the one who received the lashes, Mullah Bagher by Dayan, by Mirza Muhammad Hassan and Hussein, the beloved of martyrs and the king of martyrs. The list goes on and on. Haji Sheikh Muhammad, and also Nabil himself, Mullah Muhammad Ali, the person who wrote the Dawnbreakers, he had also come to visit. It's just phenomenal, all these different characters that are coming to see Baha'u'llah. Things are starting to change, things are starting to ripen up. A lot of the people who had claimed to be him God shall make Manahesh. Remember, Abdul Baha talks about these 25 people who had turned around and said, maybe it's me, maybe it's me. We know that they're in Baghdad, they're in Karbala, they're in Qom, Kashan, in Tabriz. Many of these people realized the folly, the error of their ways, including Nabil, who wrote the Dawnbreakers, by the way. He had thought that he perhaps was him whom God shall make manifest. And perhaps I've mentioned beforehand, he actually went so far as to announce this, to say that because Nasruddin Shah was responsible for the death of the Bab, Nasruddin Shah will die in 3 days. On the 4th day, he realized this was incorrect. So some of the people were driven by this desire for power, and thereafter, some people genuinely thought, well, if this person's rising and this person's rising, clearly I can see that they're not the right people. Maybe it is me, maybe I should step up. But a lot of these people, they twist and they then come back to the fold. Some of the people who were even in Baghdad at the time, who were involved in crazy things under the guidance of Mirza Yahya Sayyid Muhammad, some of them feigned submission, they pretended to follow Baha'u'llah. Some of them genuinely did. They turned and they actually became followers of Baha'u'llah. And again, they found this beauty, this love that was there. We know that Mirza Mu'alam Khan, he tried to join and try to help. We know that Abu Mirza, the son of Muhammad Shah, he wanted to join alongside with Mirza Malkam Khan. They were trying to get the favor of Baha'u'llah, to bring him in so that they could forward their own interests. But Baha'u'llah, again, was having none of it. We know that a man by the name of Arnold Kemble offered him British citizenship and said, look, we will offer you British citizenship. We will take you because you're being a prisoner in exile. We'll take you to India as well and we'll do X, Y, and Z. Baha'u'llah refused and no, I'm going to be staying here. The governor of Baghdad was absolutely in love with Baha'u'llah. So even so much so that when the news had come through from Ali Pasha to move him on to further into the Ottoman Empire, he didn't listen. It took 5 attempts before he would actually do anything. So he was so in love that he just didn't want to share this message. We know that Sultan Abdul Majid, who had reports of Baha'u'llah from successive governors as well, he had basically consistently refused the countenance of the request of the Persian government to deliver him there or kick him out of the territory. People were falling in love with Baha'u'llah, and this was clear and evident to see.
On no previous occasion since the inception of the faith, not even during the days when the Bab in Esfahan, in Tabriz, and in Shirk was acclaimed by the ovations of an enthusiastic populace, had any of its exponents risen to such high eminence in the public mind, or exercised over so diversified a circle of admirers an influence so far-reaching and so potent. Yet unprecedented as was the sway which Baha'u'llah held, while in that primitive age of the faith, he was dwelling in Baghdad, its range at the time was modest when compared with the magnitude of the fame, which at the close of that same age, and through the immediate inspiration of the center of his covenant, the faith acquired in both the European and American continents. The ascendancy achieved by Baha'u'llah was nowhere better demonstrated than in his ability to broaden the outlook and transform the character of the community to which he belonged. Though himself nominally a Babi, though the provisions of the Bayan were still regarded as binding and inviolable, he was able to inculcate a standard which, while not incompatible with its tenets, was ethically superior to the loftiest principles which the Babi dispensation had established. The salutary and fundamental truths advocated by the Bab that had either been obscured, neglected, or misrepresented were moreover elucidated by Baha'u'llah, reaffirmed and instilled afresh into the corporate life of the community and into the souls of the individuals who comprised it. The disassociation of the Babi faith from every form of political activity and from all secret associations and factions. The emphasis placed on the principle of nonviolence. The necessity of strict obedience to establish authority. The ban imposed on all forms of sedition, on backbiting, retaliation, and dispute. The stress laid on godliness, kindliness, humility, and piety, on honesty and truthfulness, chastity and fidelity, on justice, toleration, sociability, amity, and concord, on the acquisition of arts and sciences, on self-sacrifice and detachment, on patience, steadfastness, resignation to the will of God. All these constitute the salient features of a code of ethical conduct to which the books, treaties, and epistles revealed during those years by the indefatigable pen of Baha'u'llah unmistakably bear witness. By the aid of God and his divine grace and mercy, he himself has written with reference to the character and consequences of his own labors during that period. We revealed as a copious rain our verses and sent them to various parts of the world. We exhorted all men, and particularly this people, through our wise counsels and loving admonitions, and forbade them to engage in sedition, quarrels, disputes, or conflicts. As a result of this, and by the grace of God, waywardness and folly were changed into piety and understanding, and weapons of war converted into instruments of peace. Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha affirmed, after his return from Sulaymaniyah, made such strenuous efforts in educating and training this community, in reforming its manners, in regulating its affairs, and in rehabilitating its fortunes, that in a short while all those troubles and mischiefs were quenched, and the utmost peace and tranquility reigned in men's hearts. And again, when these fundamentals were established in the hearts of this people, they everywhere acted in such wise that in the estimation of those in authority, they became famous for the integrity of their character, the steadfastness of their hearts, the purity of their motives, the praiseworthiness of their deeds, and the excellence of their conduct. The exalted character of the teachings of Baha'u'llah, propounded during that period, is perhaps best illustrated by the following statement made by him in those days to an official who had reported to him that because of the devotion to his person, which an evildoer had professed, he had hesitated to inflict upon that criminal the punishment he deserved. Tell him no one in this world can claim any relationship to me except those who, in all their deeds and in their conduct, follow my example. in such wise that all the peoples of the earth would be powerless to prevent them from doing and saying that which is meet and seemly. This brother of mine, he further declared to that official, this Mirza Musa, who is from the same mother and father as myself, and who from his earliest childhood has kept me company, should he perpetrate an act contrary to the interests of either the state or religion, and his guilt be established in your sight, I would be pleased and appreciate your action were you to bind his hands and cast him into the river to drown, and refuse to consider the intercession of anyone on his behalf. In another connection, he, wishing to stress his strong condemnation of all acts of violence, had written, "It would be more acceptable in my sight for a person to harm one of my own sons or relatives rather than inflict injury upon any soul." Most of those who surrounded Baha'u'llah, wrote Nabil, describing the spirit that animated the reformed Babi community in Baghdad, exercised such care in sanctifying and purifying their souls that they would suffer no word to cross their lips that might not conform to the will of God, nor would they take a single step that might be contrary to his good pleasure. Each one, he relates, had entered into a pact with one of his fellow disciples, in which they agreed to admonish one another, and if necessary, chastise one another with a number of blows on the soles of the feet, proportioning the number of strokes to the gravity of the offense against the lofty standards they had sworn to observe. Describing the further of their zeal, he states that not until the offender had suffered the punishment he had solicited would he consent to either eat or drink. The complete transformation which the written and spoken word of Baha'u'llah had effected in the outlook and character of his companions was equaled by the burning devotion which his love had kindled in their souls, a passionate zeal and fervor that rivaled the enthusiasm that had glowed so fiercely in the breasts of the Bab's disciples in their moments of greatest exaltation, had now seized the hearts of the exiles of Baghdad and galvanized their entire beings. So inebriated, Nabil, describing the fecundity of this tremendously dynamic spiritual revival, has written, "So carried away was everyone by the sweet savors of the morn of divine revelation, that methinks out of every thorn sprang forth heaps of blossoms, and every seed yielded innumerable harvests. The room of the most great house," that same chronicle has recorded, "set apart for the reception of Baha'u'llah's visitors, though dilapidated and having long since outgrown its usefulness, vied through having been trodden by the blessed footsteps of the well-beloved with the most exalted paradise. Low-roofed, it yet seemed to reach to the stars, and though it boasted but a single couch fashioned from the branches of palms, whereon he who is the king of names was wont to sit, it drew to itself, even as a lodestone, the hearts of the princes."
Times are starting to change. Things again are moving. This re-energizing of the community is taking place. We know that the Bab had incredible power, His Holiness the Bab in Isfahan, or whether it was in Tabriz or Chehreg, he's transforming people. But now it's said that we've not had something as powerful as what's happening with Baha'u'llah. With the way people are reacting, I mean, it's just incredible. Even the Babis that were bad, they started becoming better. A lot of the teachings that were there were from the Bab, they're from the Bayan, of course. Now, Baha'u'llah comes in and he just refreshes them for people. He brings them into alignment and he says, look, we as Babis, we're non-political. We're not meant to be killing each other. We're not meant to be backbiting. Truthfulness is important. Patience is important. He starts bringing all of these things really to the fore as to what it is about being a Babi. It's about this character, this being, not about these words and, letting your deeds be different from your words. So Baha'u'llah's really focusing this back in. Words that the Bab has very clearly said and has brought in, and that Mullah Hussain, Khoja, Tahrir Bahir, they'd all been taking part of, they'd been doing. But people started to lose their way. So he's trying to recenter them and bring them back to this fact that it's your character that's the most important thing. And we know that people's characters started to change. Abdul Baha said that he reformed the community, that he managed to regulate the affairs of what was going on. Peace and tranquility was now coming to people's hearts. This is the change that was being brought about. Mirza Musa, who's Baha'u'llah's brother, it's reported that Baha'u'llah says that even if he does something bad, if his own brother that he'd grown up with, that they were playing together as kids, that he loved so very dearly, if his own brother were to do something wrong that was worthy of it, that his hands should be tied together and he should be thrown into the river, that no one should be able to, come and intercede on his behalf, making the point that justice is the most beloved thing, that it's not a case of one rule for you guys, but if it's for my family, my relatives, that it's a different thing, that this justice is the most important thing. He says that I'd rather somebody harms my own sons than harm somebody else. Again, it's like this turn the other cheek that we hear about, this whole thing about love thy brother, of just do what you can to make the world a better place. And he says there's going to be no special thing with me where I say, no, he's my brother, let me off. That's not the way it's going to be. All should do good things. Their behavior should change. Some of the believers there came up with this punishment pact, this thing where, for example, Patrick and I may say to each other, right, if we do something bad, you punish me, you bastinado me. Patrick wouldn't do something bad, so I wouldn't get to bastinado him. But there was this thing where they would bring themselves to account. There'd be this accountability that they would bring in and realize what the standard is. And they'd try not to do anything unless it was walking in the name of God, aligned with what God wants. And that was, again, the main thing, bringing the center back, this Islam, submitting yourself to the will of God and really changing yourself. Baghdad is now feeling revived. It's even said that the thorn of the rose, the sharp point of it that causes pain, even that started to blossom. Such beautiful language that's being brought in here. And that house that we'd spoken about, the Soleimani Gharam, the house where everyone would come to and the Babis would meet each other and everything, that was an old, dilapidated house. There was nothing there. There was just this couch that was there. It was completely useless. But the fact that Baha'u'llah had come into this house, that had made the whole house anew and given the house a completely and utterly different meaning. And that's what the power of Baha'u'llah was able to do. Soleimani Gharam had now become this most great house. Are there any comments or questions, ladies and gentlemen?
People who had lived through the Bab, could they not see the resemblance between the Bab and Baha'u'llah?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think then there was a perception that he was the one whom God would make manifest?
I think some people of insight realised this. I mean, obviously, Abdul Baha had realised, his Bab, who says, I was the first to believe in him. Tahirah also, she had realised, and when she was in Baghdad, I think Nabil was shown something in someone's house of her writings that she had recognised who Baha'u'llah was. There was one of the Babis mentioned there who apparently had realised the greatness of Baha'u'llah. Dayan, before the declaration, realised the greatness of Baha'u'llah. But again, Baha'u'llah is not trying to be in the limelight. That's not what he's trying to do, because we need the revelation of the Bab. He's in love with Sayyid Ali Muhammad, with the Bab. It's a real love story between them.
One thing I'd like to say to David, one of the things I've done towards the end of my existence is to look at the Babi Baha'i period in the lens of the Quran, chapter 39, verse 68 and 69. That's the lens I use. Chapter 39 of the Quran, verse 68 and 69, because I know there are a lot of young people on this 40 list, people in the list. They can use it and they can go on Wikipedia. Chapter 39, verse 68 and 69 says that the first reality at the time of the end is a major trumpet blast. Trumpet blast number 1. This will be a bugle, will be a trumpet, but as a consequence of this, Dave, when the trumpet is fully blasted, humanity will enter semi-death. In Sa'aqa means they go into not complete death, but semi-death during and as a consequence of this Nafkhaya Ula, this first trumpet blast. Then there is a second trumpet blast, that all the people who had become stupefied, astounded, semi-dead, comatose, they will all arise again. Because the Quran says, at that point, the earth will shine with the Nur al-Rab, with the glory of God, with the light of God. So that particular surah and its lens is used by Abdul Baha, is used by the beloved guardian Shawqi Effendi, and is used by Baha'u'llah himself so many times, 50, 100 times, as a lens to what happened in this incredibly beautiful period, David, that you've been administering today. In other words, the Babi period was brilliant. Tawhir, Quddus, Hujjat, Wahid, the 10,000 martyrs, but it entered a period of semi-coma. It was like that advert that you may have remembered that we used to see in our youth. When you had the Fanta orange, you became tangoed. And then once you're tangoed, then it requires a lot of slow, to wake up again. So the Baha'u'llah in the Baghdad period, acting on Salman, acting on the twin martyrs of Isfahan, acting on those 12 people that Miss Yvette Hakim read their names, and of course Mitra read it most eloquently, they became revived. And from then on, Dave, we are revived, rejuvenated, but the tests continue.
Thy name is my healing, O my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearness to thee is my hope, and love for thee is my companion. Thy mercy to me is my healing, and my succor in this world and the world to come. Thou verily art the all-bountiful, the all-knowing, the all-wise.